In the previous tutorial video, we learned about how you can manipulate a Boolean literal values, mainly just true and false. And the way we actually write Boolean expressions in the previous tutorial is by using relational operations. So that's how you compare numbers. So here you can say 3 less than 5, and also you got all the other relational operators, and the result will just be either true or false. Okay? And also we went a little bit further by saying you can also make the integer, which will be the operands for the relational operations, as variables. In this case, you can see even though we are printing the same line over here, for example, if you compare line number 8 and line number 15, so these two lines are, line number 8 and line number 16. So these two lines are exactly identical. However, the two operands for the relational operator, which is equal for equality comparison. In this case, x and y are simply just variables, which means depending on the values that are currently stored in x and y, it can affect the relation between x and y, right? In the case where x and y are 23, equals would just be true. In the case where x and y are 56, 89, and it will be false. Okay, that's what we learned from the previous tutorial video. However, if you're only able to write using a single relational operator, it may be too simple. Okay, for complicated programs where you want to actually try to assert something that's more complicated, and you just want to know whether something more complicated is either the case or not the case. In that case, you have to somehow combine different relational operations together. That's the focus for this particular video. And to do this, we have to learn about logical operators. Okay, so that's something I will illustrate to you. Let's again build from the basics. Let's create a new class over here. So right click on the source, and then you can say new class. Okay, let's first of all create logical operation 1. Okay, logical operation 1, and then I would say main method. Okay, just be consistent with the previous one. Let's put plural over here. Logical operations 1, and then with a main method and finish. Okay, so now let's maximize the tab over here, and now let's try to introduce you to the 3 different logical operators. Okay, let me just write a comments here. / and star and this. There are 3 logical operators for you to combine Boolean expressions that are made of the relational. How about this? Combine relational operations. That'll be a little bit easier for you to understand. Combine relational operations. Okay, and each of which evaluating to true or false. Okay, so now let's just tell you what the operators are, and then we'll introduce them to you conceptually, and then we'll do some programming to verify how they work. Okay, number 1 is called logical negation. Okay, and number 2 is called logical conjunction, and the number 3 is called logical disjunction. Okay, and informally you can think about logical negation simply means not the case. Okay, if you say something it is true, what will be the logical negation for that? Simply false. If you say something is not the case, so what will be the logical negation for that? It will be true. Okay, just flip basically. Logical negation is very easy, but we'll see example. What about logical conjunction? Informally you can understand it as just and. If you say you want to conjoin 2 things together, that means first thing must be true, and the second thing must be true as well. If it is not the case that both are true, it will be false. Okay. Logical disjunction over here, informally you can understand it as or. So that simply means if you're given 2 things that are both Boolean. Okay, so you are saying either if the first thing is true or the second thing is true, either way. However, that would mean if both are false, that means nothing is true, and that means the overall result will be false. Okay, so that's kind of the informal meaning, but I will show you precisely what they really mean. So what I said verbally is just informal, okay, and also incomplete. So I'll just mention that to you in the truth table on the iPad. Okay, how do you do these 3 operators? Let me put some tab over here in Java. For the logical negation, you have to use the exclamation mark, okay, the band symbol. And for logical conjunction, it has to be ampersand, ampersand, okay, 2 ampersands. And also for logical disjunction, it will be vertical bar, vertical bar, okay? So these are the 3 operator symbols you have to understand, okay? First of all, you have to know what they are, and now we're going to talk about what they really mean, okay? So now we'll go over the meanings for all the 3 logical operators, and then for this current class, we're going to do some simple illustration on how they can be manipulated, and then we're going to talk about some common application, some simple application of using each one of the 3 operators. Okay, let's now switch to iPad, and now let's talk about the 3 different logical operators. So the first one, let's talk about a simple one. So let's talk about negation. Okay, and for logical negation over here, it is so-called a unary operator. Okay, I'll put it here. So it's so-called unary operator. Unary in the sense that you're only expecting one operand for this particular operator, whereas for conjunction and disjunction, they are called binary operator. Okay, let me put it down. So for conjunction, for example, and also for disjunction, so they are so-called binary operator. Binary operator in the sense that for if you want to perform conjunction, you're expecting 2 operands, the left operand and the right operand, P and Q. Okay, I'm just using P and Q symbolically to say P is the first operand or the left operand, and Q is the second operand or the right operand. Okay, so let's talk about negation, which is very simple. Negation, informally speaking, you can understand it as simply not. Okay, so now if you want to apply the explanation mark, which is the logical negation, you're only expecting only one operand, which is called P. Okay, that's the only one you're expecting, which is the blue one, which is the only operand. So now, what can be the possible value for P before you apply the logical negation? Because we talk about P and Q over here, they're simply just Boolean expressions, just Boolean type. In that case, P can be either true or false, right? So what I will do is I'll say P can either be, before being applied the logical negation, it can be either true or false. Okay, either way. So now let's talk about what will be the consequence after you apply the logical negation to P. Okay, so now let's see how that will work. So now it's very easy. In the case where it is true, okay, I simply say it is not the case, it is true. That means it is false. Okay, similarly, for the second case, when P is actually false, when we say it is not the case that P is false, which means P is true. Okay, just basically reverse the result for the operand. Okay, that's for logical negation, very easy, but we'll see application in just a moment. So now let's talk about conjunction. For conjunction, I'm going to talk about both operator, conjunction and disjunction. I'll talk about both of them together because in some way they work quite symmetrically. You just have to know the critical difference between the 2 operators, which I will explain. And now, informally speaking, first of all, you can see that over here, conjunction means and. Both must be true. And disjunction means or, which means either one of them has to be true. Okay? So now, and the operator is simply in the case where conjunction, you got ampersand, ampersand over here, and then you got 2 operands, P and Q. Okay? This is the left operand, this is the right operand for conjunction. And similarly, you also have over here, let me just, over here, this vertical bar is the disjunction. And you also got 2 operands over here, the left operand P and the right operand Q. Okay, you got 2 operands over here. So now, let's figure out exactly how we can define the meaning for conjunction and disjunction. Since we got 2 operands, individually, you can think about in this way. Individually, for P over here, it's a Boolean value, right? Which means it can be either true or false. Similarly, for Q over here, it can also be either true or false. So now, what would be the how many combinations can we have between P and Q? P can be either true or false. Q can also be true or false. So we got 2 times 2, 4 possibilities over here. Okay, hopefully you can understand that. Okay, so now let's enumerate the way we let's enumerate all the possible values between P and Q. One way to think about it is you can think about false represent the digits 0 and true represent the digits 1. That's one way to think of it. So now basically you have both P and Q. So now you can simply enumerate this way. You can say 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, and 1, 1. Okay? So this is the binary representation for 0, binary representation for 1, binary representation for 2, binary representation for 3. So 0, 1, 2, 3, we got 4 possibilities, right? That's one way to think of it. So this corresponds to false, false. This corresponds to false, true. And this corresponds to true, false. And this corresponds to true, true. Okay, let's do it. Okay, so now let me just do it. So false, 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 true, true, false, and true, true. Okay, I'll do the same for this table over here. False, 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 true, true, false, and true, true. And then let me put a false over here. So here we got false, 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 true, true, false, and true, true. Okay, and false, 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 true, true, false, and true, true. Okay, so these are the 4 possibilities. For both conjunction and disjunction, the number of possibilities for both operands are simply the same. Okay, this is how you can think of it, how to enumerate. Okay, you can also do as an exercise. If you say P and Q and R, in this case you got 3 operands, then how many possibilities do you have? You have 2 to the power of 3, which is 8 possibilities. I'll let you enumerate that as an exercise. Okay, so now let's go back to the table over here. So now this is how you can understand the critical difference between conjunction and disjunction. In the case of the conjunction over here, okay, in the case of the conjunction, the only way you can make the overall result P and Q true is when both are true. So this is the only way. Okay, and what I will do is this is the only way to make them true. Okay, when both P and Q are true, in that case P and Q over here will just be true. Otherwise, if at least one of them is actually false, then the overall result will just be false. Okay, which means over here I can simply say false, false, at least one of them is actually false. And this one also at least one of them is false. And here also at least one of them is false. Okay, so this is the truth table. Okay, which means over here this will be true, and here this will be false. That's how you can think of it. So the best way to understand conjunction is the only way to make the result true is when both operands are true. Otherwise, it will be false. Okay. So now let's look at the way disjunction works, which will be quite symmetric. Disjunction works this way. Because disjunction simply means or, which means it will be true as long as at least one of them is actually true. So when would it be false? It would be false if both are false, which means none of them is true. Okay, so that's kind of the opposite to the way conjunction works. So what I would say is over here, let's now focus on the case where both are actually false. So when both operands are simply false, that means you have no option but having evaluation for disjunction being false. Otherwise, if any one of them is actually true, in this case, you can see in this case, at least one of them is true, so it will be true. And now over here, at least one of them is true, it will be true. And over here, at least one of them is true, and it will be true. Okay, so that will be the result for the truth table. So this is the only case where it is false, and this is the otherwise it would just be true because at least one of them is true. Okay, now finally I want to draw a remark to you. So what you really want to compare is this particular row versus this particular row in the two operator. This particular row tells you that the result for conjunction will be true only if both operands are true. Otherwise, if any one of them is actually false, then it will just be false. Okay? And then if you look at this row here for disjunction, the disjunction will be false only if both operands are actually false. Otherwise, if any one of them is actually true, the result will just be true. Okay, that's really the insight into the logical operators. Hopefully you understand that. Okay, once we understand the three operators conceptually, let's now go to Eclipse and do some simple exercise. Okay, let's now go back to Eclipse over here, and now let's try to verify the truth table. Okay, so now the way I'm going to do it, I'm going to have P and Q, just like how we did it. Let's do the simple case, which is logical negation. So I would say Boolean over here, I would say P. Let's say if P is simply just true in the beginning, and then I can simply say system.out.println. Okay, there are two ways for you to do this. You can either say, P is logical negation of P being, okay, that's a value for P, is, okay, and then we can say not P. Okay, so here you can see that we have P over here, and then we try to print out not P. Okay, that's one way to do it. We can also say, once we reassign P to, let's say, false, and then we can try to print out exactly the same line over here. We can say logical negation of P being, in this case, it would be false, would be not P, not false, would be true. Okay, let's verify this, and I'll show you a slightly different way of writing this, and then we'll move on to conjunction and disjunction. Okay, let's go back to Package Explorer, and then I will right click on this class over here and say run as Java application. Okay, it would say the logical negation of P being true. Oh, you know what? Let me add a space over here. Okay, that'll be better. Let me execute it again. Okay, logical negation of P being true is not P, which is false. Logical negation of P being false is not false, which is true. Okay, that's a very simple manipulation. Okay, so now what I would do is let me show you a slightly different way of writing this. So over here you can see I simply put the logical negation directly inside the print line statements. That's one way to do it. Or if you like to introduce another variable, you may do so. Okay, let me just say this. Boolean negation over here is simply not P. Okay, you can see that what I'm trying to do over here is I say negation is simply applying the logical negation to the value of P. In this case, P, because it is simply just true. So I will say not P will just be false. Okay. Similarly, over here, after I say P is reassigned to false, I can say negation is reassigned to not P. Okay, you must explicitly do that. Otherwise, negation would not be just updated automatically. So when you reassign P to false, and then we reassign negation to whatever the current value P is, and apply the negation to that. Okay, and now rather than saying not P, okay, you can keep two versions on your code, but for me, the final version will be this version here. Okay, and I can put negation over here, and then over here, I can put negation over here. Okay, so these are the two versions. Okay. Okay, so logical negation of P being true is false, and the logical negation of P being false is true. Okay, so that's the logical negation. Let's do logical conjunction and disjunction and see how they work. They work in a very similar way. Okay, so now what I would do is let me just do another class just for clarity. So now let me just create another class. Okay, right click and say new, and then class. Logical operations 2. Okay, and then for this class, we're going to talk about conjunction and disjunction all together and say finish. Okay, so now what I would do is, so now I'll say Boolean P is, P would be, let's say, false. Boolean, remember the table over here? So let's say start with the first row, false, false. Okay, false, false. Okay, So, and Q is initialized to false. Okay, and now after that, we're gonna print out conjunction and disjunction. Okay, and make sure, of course, you want to spell it correctly, otherwise it cannot be recognized. And now let's find out exactly what a conjunction is and what a disjunction is. And of course, I can just define Boolean conjunction would be P and Q. And Boolean, you know what? Let me just show you both flavor. Let's say for the case of conjunction, I'm gonna have a new variable, but for the disjunction, I'm gonna put it directly in the print statement, so you can see both flavors. Okay, they are both equivalents. Just one using a variable, the other one is not using a variable. Okay, but when you are using a variable, you must make sure every time if the variables are actually changed, you have to reflect it. You wanna reassign it. I'll show you. Okay, system.out.println. Okay, I would say conjunction of. Okay, I would say P first, and then have Q. Okay, is, and over here I can say conjunction. Okay, that's the first flavor. And then let me just copy this line here, and then I will simply say disjunction. And in the case of disjunction, I'm not going to actually use a auxiliary variable. I'm simply just going to say over here P and disjunction P or Q. Okay, just that one. Okay, so now why don't we try? So now you can see what should be the case for conjunction over here. For the case of the you can definitely look back to the truth table on your notes. But I'm going to say this again. In the case of conjunction, because at least one of them is actually false, so the result will just be false. In the case of disjunction, because it is not the case that at least one of them is actually true, so that means I have no option but it's going to be false. Okay, so you can just apply the previous explanation I just explained in the truth table. So now if I try to execute this block of code, and then I would say right click and there's a run as Java application. So what we'll get is for both cases, when both P and Q are simply just false, for conjunction it will be false, and for disjunction it will be false. Okay. So now let's do some reassignments over here. Okay, we got false false, and also we got false true and false true for the second row on the table. So what I will do is P explicitly, of course, you can simply don't reassign P to false again, but I'm just doing that explicitly just to make it very clear. Okay, and Q is reassigned to true, so false and true. And then of course you want to make sure you must actually reassign the conjunction to be the current value for P and Q. Otherwise, conjunction will just stay with the previous result, okay, which is just false. Okay, what I would do is I'm gonna copy these two lines over here, and then okay, so these two lines will just be the same. Okay, you can see line number 8, line number 9 versus line number 14 and line number 15. They are exactly identical. But now, because the variables that they depend on, which is P and Q, and also conjunction, also P or Q, because the variables for P and Q have changed, so their result might change as well. Okay, so now what about for conjunction? When you say P, because at least one of them is actually false, so it must be false. And for the case of disjunction, because at least one of them is actually true, so the result will be just true. Execute the program, you will see that over here, conjunction of false and true will be false, and the disjunction of false and true will be true. Okay, so we have done 2 rows already. Let's speed up a little bit, and then we will end the video. And then in the next video, we'll show you more complicated example for using the logical operator. Okay, let's do another one over here. So now we got, so the third row is true, false. So the result will just be the same as false, true. It's just that the order of the operands have been swapped, basically. Okay, so true, false. Okay, so now for the case of conjunction, because we know at least one of the operands is false, so it will be false. For the case of the disjunction, because at least one of the operands is actually true, so it will be true. Let's verify that. Okay, over here you can see conjunction for true and false will be false. Disjunction for true and false will be true. Okay, Finally, let's go to the final row. True, true. Okay, and true, true over here. And then I'm gonna basically copy this one over here. And then I'm gonna change to true, true. Okay, now what I want to show you is you can see that P and Q. So now for conjunction, because this is the only case where conjunction would be true, because both operands are actually true. Okay, for all the other three cases we just talked about, at least one of them is false, so it would just be false. Now for the case of the disjunction, because at least one of them, either this one or this one, actually both of them are true, so of course it will be true. Okay, let's execute it, and now I'll show you one more thing, and then we'll end this video. If I do that, you can see that conjunction for true and true is true. Disjunction for true and true is true. Okay, I want to show you one thing over here. Okay, let me see which one I want to show you. Okay, now I want to ask you the following. Pay attention to this. Over here, I say over here, conjunction of true and false is false, and here conjunction of true and true is true, right? Okay, so that means the result for conjunction in this case over here is false, and the result for the conjunction for this case over here is true. So from false to true, so they are different. Now, my question is, if I simply comment out this line, okay, you can just move your mouse cursor to the line and say Control/, okay, and now so that means this line number 25 has become a comment, which will not be interpreted by the runtime execution engine anymore, so it will not be executed. Okay, what we expected to see will be false and true. That's what we expect to see, right? But now let's see if that will still be the case. Okay, make sure you save the file so it will be compiled, and that will execute it. Now look at this line here. Conjunction of true and false is false. I agree. However, conjunction of true and true is false. That is not right. Okay, that's actually the argument I made before. Because conjunction is a variable that is going to store the result for P and Q. You want to make sure P and Q are the latest value for the P and Q, right? So that's why you have to reassign conjunction to P and Q. So what's going on here? Let me trace the program to make sure you got 100% understanding. So what I would do is I'm going to make a screenshot for this particular block of program over here. Oh, you know what? Let me just make sure you can also see that it's indeed a comment. So what I will do is I'll go from over here. Okay, I'm gonna show you only this block of code and show you why it would be wrong. Okay, let me move to iPad over here, a new page, and then let me paste that particular block of code. Okay, let me just wait for the computer to react. Okay, let me now paste it. Okay, let me make it bigger for you. So now this is the block of code that we just tried. Okay, especially you can see that line number 25 has now been put into comments, so it's not going to be executed by the computer. So now let's see how it has gone wrong. So now I want you to, first of all, we have two Boolean variables, P and Q. So we got P over here, which can store Boolean value only. And also we got Q over here, which can store Boolean value only. In the case of P, it would be storing true. Okay, you know what? I better be a little bit more consistent with my color. Okay, let me just do it perfectly. Okay, let me just do it now. So now we have two variables for P and Q. So P over here and Q over here. Okay, in the case of P, it's going to store true. In the case of Q, it's going to store false. Agree? Okay, so this is what we got for these two lines, true and false. And now, when we try to execute this line over here, we got another variable called conjunction. I'll put conjunction over here. For conjunction, it's going to be P and Q. So P over here and Q. Because it is not the case that both are true. So it would be false according to the truth table over here, right? Okay, you can see that it's basically the case where it's true, false. This is this case over here. Okay, so it will be false. Okay, it would be false over here. Okay, so now of course it would be, so that means for this line specifically, it's going to say conjunction will be false. Okay, so far so good. So this is also why if I see the console over here, it is okay that it is going to print out false. Okay, but now we want to find out why true and true will be false. That's what we want to find out. Okay, let's go back here. So now what we will do is we will try to execute. Let's not worry about the disjunction. They are not an issue because we don't have any auxiliary variable. We just print it out directly. It's guaranteed. P and Q are always the latest value. It's okay. So now let's go on to this particular reassignments over here, P and Q over here, right? So now P is reassigned to true and Q is also reassigned to true. Both of them are reassigned to true. So that means in this case, P is reassigned to true. I'll just write it out explicitly for you. And Q is also reassigned to true. Okay, so now we should expect P and Q to be true. However, you can see that because this line has been commented out, it has become a programming comment, it will not be executed anymore. So that when we execute this program at runtime, this line will be skipped. So this one is not going to be executed. So that means we'll try to execute this line directly. And now we're going to say conjunction of what is P in this case? Well, P will be true. And then what will be Q? It will also be true. So far the P and Q's values are the most up to date. However, for the conjunction over here, you can see that it still remains to be the value that has not been updated just yet, right? So it will still be false. So this is why this is so-called logical error that we talk about, right? So this is the kind of a logical error, which means your program compiles with no syntax error, without type error, and also your program doesn't crash, but you got logical error. Your output is simply not as expected. Okay, so that is why you got this. So now what we need to do is we want to make sure we remove these comments over here so that the conjunction over here can be reflected by the latest value for P and the latest value for Q and take their conjunction, which will be true, right? So this is why if you simply don't have this line over here, it will be wrong. Okay, please make sure you understand this particular example. So make sure you don't have this kind of logical error. Okay, so what I would do is, let me just make a comment for you. This line is critical to make sure when you print out the value of conjunction, which is the variable, it reflects the most up-to-date values stored in P and Q. Okay, hopefully you understand that. Okay, let me just comment out this line. Okay, so now this line is really crucial, and you also have to understand without this line, what can go wrong. Okay, so now we're going to end this video over here. In the next video, we're going to show you some simple application for the Boolean, for the logical operators.